Hi, I'm Zane, Inglis, founder and CEO of Enhance.
And I'm Ryan Sheppard, Japan headhunter and author of Sell Yourself Like a CEO.
Welcome into Future Fit Leaders. Today we're talking about a really impactful topic, coaching and development. So Ryan, you know I'm very passionate about coaching. I live it every day, but what gets you excited about coaching?
Yeah, what gets me excited about coaching is the fact that although we don't see it on the surface, what actually happens behind the scenes is that the further up you go in an organization, the more and more coaching often gets sought out. And so even CEOs have coaches behind them, helping them through making difficult decisions, adapting their leadership style to different situations, being self-aware, someone just to vent to, someone to be accountable to. So that's just a fascinating fact that take a Dr. Marshall Goldsmith, for example, #1 executive coach in the US. And he's known to have some of the highest rates in the whole business because he's coaching top tier CEOs and keeping them accountable to things that align to their values and goals. So what an amazing and profound thing that an accountability point or having a coach in life can be so valuable. So that's the lesson for the rest of us. Maybe we don't need $150,000 coaching sessions, but what does coaching mean for us and where does it fit into our life so that we too can become the best versions of ourselves?
Coaching is a really strange topic that I find the lower you get into an organization, the more resistant people are to deliver it and actually receive it, because the average field level employee, they have this strange sense of self-confidence and they feel like if someone coaches them, it's an acknowledgement that they're not good enough. Or they'll look at their manager and say, man, I know more about my job than he does. Why the hell would I want advice from him? Yet the further up you get, as you say, people will pay good money, sometimes out of their own pocket, to get the coaching to help them deliver the results. And the example I always give to managers who are apprehensive about coaching their team because maybe they don't have the same industry experience as their team members, or in some cases their team members are older, is look at Tiger Woods, one of the greatest athletes who ever lived, the greatest golfer. Does that guy have a coach, or did he have a coach when he was at his peak? And of course he did. And he paid hundreds of thousands of dollars out of his own pocket to get that as the greatest human to ever do what he was doing. So clearly his coach wasn't better than him. But he sought that third-party advice to get him to look at things in a different way because he was always striving for that little nuance that could make the biggest difference. And I think that's one thing that people misconstrue, the difference between teaching and coaching, right? So as an employee, maybe your manager's just been telling you what to do or giving you one-way advice, so that's why your perception of coaching isn't great. So one of the things I'd love to talk about today is maybe getting your definition of coaching and compare that to what teaching and telling, which will often get people to be a little bit more willing to deliver coaching and accept it themselves.
Yeah, that's a very important distinction, isn't it? So I guess to me, a coach is someone who guides you through questions. They help to bring the right answer out of you that you already have inside of you. And you just need a coach to kind of pull it out of you because you oftentimes we have the answer, but we might not realize it. We don't have perhaps the confidence or clarity or need a bit of encouragement to bring that out. Whereas a mentor, on the other hand, is someone who is both guiding and asking questions, but also showing the way, even demonstrating, almost like an apprenticeship by their side, a fly on the wall, shadowing even. So that's a combination of both the asking part, but also showing them how it's done, the tricks of the trade, and whatever the context may be.
I guess the most fundamental question I get is the teaching and the coaching difference. And for me, coaching is something you can use as a skill to develop someone who has a base knowledge or a minimum level of experience in whatever it is you're trying to enhance. So you can ask them engaging questions about what they're doing, how they're doing it, to help them find and discover new ideas. But if someone doesn't have that base experience, you've got to teach or train them first. So when you have a new hire, for example, and they're in their first week of work, and in my context, it's often sales, they have no idea what sales is. So it's very difficult to coach them. You have to give them that base knowledge. And there are benefits to both, or all three of them, teaching, coaching, and mentoring, but having a clear distinction and understanding which is the best time to use which, and not just doing it unconsciously, it's consciously making the decision. So for me, again, my definition of coaching is using engaging questions to help someone think about things on a deeper level or from a different perspective to what they would normally do in order to find better outcomes for themselves. Teaching or training is when you give someone new or advanced knowledge they don't actually have at the time. And like you talked about, mentoring is when you actually work through it together to help them create a success story. And the other key point for me is the difference between formal and informal coaching. I think a lot of managers give situational advice based on something they've seen that's just happened. You shouldn't do that. You should have done this. I think formal coaching is where you set a clear time, where you sit down and you focus on developing a specific skill or competency. You record and track the outcomes. You provide written feedback. So that's the key focus. Whereas situational coaching is great when you can have a discussion before someone is about to deliver a presentation or meet a customer or review the outcomes. But it's less formal and it's more situational, based on getting a better outcome right then and there. So in a headhunter's role, I guess, how does coaching come into that? I guess you're almost playing a coaching role on a day-to-day basis as a headhunter, right?
Yeah, I was going to say coaching has a lot of similarities to sales, because effective sales is being able to understand what someone really needs, what are their wants and needs emotionally, and then if this is the right product, then how is it going to benefit your pain point or what it is that you're looking to satisfy. In my role as a headhunter, coaching very much comes down to guiding someone to take an offer, right? And as a headhunter with a lot of experience, I can generally tell pretty early if it's going to be right or not. But there's always going to be emotional uncertainties in the end. There's always going to be that hesitation to take a risk, take a leap. And sometimes it comes down to small things that get amplified because of that uncertainty. So just guiding someone through, just acknowledging those. Anything else? Is there anything else? Any other questions or concerns? And really staying in tune with how the other person is feeling and giving them the space to speak that. Because that phone call with me or that Teams call with me to debrief after an interview might be the only minute they actually get to stop and think about, is this right for me? How do I feel about that? What's my wife going to say? What's my father-in-law going to say? What's my cat going to say? And all the things that go through the head. So giving that space to let them be coached and let them, ask for advice as well is important, because then that's, putting trust in us to give them advice. Because as whether coach or mentor, it's critical in both cases that the person wants the advice, otherwise none of it works. Otherwise it's imposed and starts becoming power harassment or something.
I often find like some of the leaders I work with have been trained to coach, so they have a huge amount of confidence in their coaching ability and maybe a little bit of too much swagger about it at times, and they genuinely believe they're coaching. But I can still think of an example, working with a manager and his sales rep from a very famous medical instruments company, and this guy had come from another even more famous company, and he said, yes, I've got this coaching certificate. And we observed the sales rep talking to a doctor, and as soon as we left the doctor and we got on the escalator to leave the hospital, the manager looked at the sales rep and said, well, that didn't go very well, did it? And then we proceeded to head to the car and find a spot to sit down and have a coaching conversation. As soon as you give the person you're coaching the outcome, it's no longer a coaching session. So one of the things I really advise people is to try and keep a poker face. Your expressions, thinking about the way you ask questions. So, well, Ryan, that didn't go very well. What do you think? So as soon as a manager tells you what they think the outcome is, even if you thought it went great, you're not going to say, well, I thought it went great. A lot of the time you'll think, oh, God. So trying to stay very neutral. So how was that for you, Ryan? Did you achieve the outcomes you thought you were going to achieve? And allow the person to self-reflect and give you their own thoughts first, because it's really important for me as a manager. If I see that someone hasn't been able to deliver something to my level, I want to know, do they think they did or not? And if the person comes back and says, you know what, Zane, that wasn't what I was looking to do, this is why it didn't work, that's fine with me, because they've got the self-awareness to pick up that even when I'm not there. But if they come out and say, man, I nailed that, that's where I need to help them reflect on what was potentially missing without telling them, no, you weren't actually able to do that. So that's one key point, is like thinking about how you, trying to think of the word bias conversations as a coach. Try and stay as neutral as possible so you get honest answers from your team member.
If I think about the typical organization, big or small, naturally you've got your 20% of top performers and then you've got 20% of low performers. So as you just said, Zane, seeing where their understanding is of if they've done a good job or not, and they think they've done great, but it's barely meeting your standards, I imagine that's a really common frustration for leaders, how to deal with those underperformers who just don't really have a clear sense of what great looks like, or they're underperforming and don't seem to have the self-awareness to realize where their true gaps are. What have you seen that's worked in those kinds of situations? What kind of coach or mentorship approach works to get through to those people?
Very, very common situation on an individual leaders basis or across organizations. And one of the key reasons for that is there's a lack of an aligned agreement on what best practice looks like. So as managers, we naturally think we're the best practice. I was a classic example of that. Probably through to my late 30s, I was a manager from about 18 years old, and I just thought I was normal, so I thought I was best practice, but I was never able to formalize what I saw that I was doing that my team should be doing. So what I do these days is encourage my clients to create what I call a job profile, which is a list of the fundamental skills, the core knowledge, and the mindset we believe and agree to is necessary to succeed in that particular role. Maybe you've got 5, 6, 7 points for each category. You get the team to understand the meaning of those, and then you just give them the list and give them a couple of days to think about it and rate themselves on each of those. And I don't use numeric ratings. I use, in Japan, they have a thing they call a nijumaru, which is just a circle with a circle inside it, which is a strength that you're really confident in. A circle means that you believe it's adequate, and a triangle is something you think you need to improve on. And just having them go through and reflect and write, these 3 symbols, and then having a coaching conversation about it. And you'll find that they'll generally fall into 3 groups. One is they rate themselves lowly, so there's a lot of triangles. One, there are a lot of double circles and very few triangles. And the other one will be quite balanced. So what I'll do then is say, for each category, give me the 2 things, highlight them in green that you really believe are your strengths, and highlight 2 things in pink that you think, if I improve this a little bit, it'd help me deliver better results. Mm-hmm. So you're going from 30 or so down to 6. And then I really recommend, when you're coaching, focus on skill, mm-hmm. because knowledge is generally something you acquire through self-study or reading and so forth. Mm-hmm. Mindset is something that's quite difficult to change, so the mindset side of things is more awareness, but then focusing on 1 or 2 skills that you can learn a new technique and understanding how that technique would impact on your productivity. So, for example, it could be preparation, better goal setting, and prioritization may be the skill I'm working on. By going through that, complete ambiguous, it could be anything, down to a framework of maybe 20 or 30 core skills, knowledge, and attitude, to focusing in on a couple of skills that the person can improve. And then thinking about, if I improve that skill, how would it impact on me? How would it impact on the performance? Then how could I go about doing that? And have a a once a month conversation about that. How have you gone this month with setting goals and prioritization? Give me a couple of examples of how it's worked well and how you're struggling it. And then you can have a more continuous conversation. You'll start to see conscious growth. A little bit long-winded explanation, but yeah, it's got to be about structure and having a clear picture of success and self-evaluation against that.
Yeah, the book Sell Yourself Like a CEO, it was written with this person in mind, the person who is, let's say, a director. They're already managing people and maybe even a couple lines of management, so they're perhaps managing managers, but they want to break into the C-suite. And so to get there, they need to get bigger management experience, or somehow springboard themselves into a C-suite role that manages a much wider breadth of the business. So what coaching and mentorship looks like at those different levels is very different, right? Even from a first line manager to a second line manager, where you're going from managing individuals to then managing managers who are managing the crises that get escalated to those managers from the feet on the ground. And then that next layer up is going to look like even more critical crises that you're managing on a day-to-day basis, more difficult decisions, who to fire, who's really needed, whose performance can we measure and whose can't we. And as well as not only how you allow yourself to be coached, but how you coach your subordinates then, because it's a higher level of seniority that you're coaching there. So the concept of coaching and mentorship changes throughout their career. But one thing is for sure, that those who proactively seek coaching and mentorship go farther, faster, and they get tuned in with who they are. And it's that self-awareness and accountability to becoming the best version of themselves that gets them further along the way. And then guess what? A byproduct of that is their income statement and how much money they take home to their family, or equity they build up through their package. So I would encourage listeners today to think about, how can a coach and a mentor fit into their life? For me, a mentor, I've got several mentors. Some of them maybe don't even know that they're my mentor, but I see them that way, and I feel like I'm around a mentor when I'm around them. One of them I see once a year at their annual New Year's party. I know I could reach out anytime, and I would for big decisions in life in certain domains, but that's enough, to see him once a year, and we have that chat where he looks me in the eye, gives me his undivided attention, and says, "What's going on, Ryan?" And I just ask him anything. And this is someone who's, highly accomplished in a certain part of life. Whereas for another part of life, like health, for example, I've had a health coach at one point. So just to keep this clear, a mentor for me is someone who's much further ahead in life in a certain domain than me. And just having around them in my life, having a relationship with them and touch points now and then is a blessing to have. Whereas a coach then is going to help me to achieve a result, or to acquire a skill as quickly as possible. So during COVID, I got a fitness coach, and that coach understood exactly the results I was trying to achieve to that. And that helped me achieve a certain fitness state. So mentor, someone where I want to get to in life in some way, and a coach, someone to help me achieve a specific skill. Think about what that might mean for you.
I want to give people kind of an example that sort of consolidates that from a business perspective of the potential impact. And also understanding, as an organization, you can't just allow your managers to willingly opt out of coaching. It has to be one of the fundamental roles of a leader, is to help your team deliver better results and improve weaknesses in order to be able to deliver better results themselves, rather than doing the job for underperformers who can't do it and don't want to do it. And a really specific example of this was a company that was selling surgical instruments, so the different scalpels and so forth, and tools that doctors use. It was a group of 8 people. There was a manager and 7 employees. The 7 employees were not able to develop new business opportunities themselves. They were reliant on inbound inquiries from distributors. They just simply would not go out and proactively spark up conversations with doctors. The manager, however, was able to do that in a very structured way, but he wouldn't teach his team how to do it. So the company made a decision to stop him playing or selling himself and focus his time on coaching his team, but not just telling him to do that. I did it for him. I showed him how it worked. I coached his team for him together so that initially his team realized what real coaching was and how it was empowering. It wasn't something that was negative. And he slowly started to acquire the skill with my support. And the net result was, in 9 months of him stopping selling, the team grew sales by $800,000 in gross profit.
Nice.
Through coaching and developing someone to do something they weren't capable or willing to do and stopping doing it yourself. So it does have a huge impact. But the key is, if you don't know how to coach, search for advice, upskill yourself, because if you've never experienced coaching and the benefit yourself, it's very difficult to get motivated to sell it to other people. It can be really fun, but it's frustrating, right? Because it seems like it's easier to do it yourself for people who can't do it. And sometimes that's you get that personal sense of gratification. But all I'll encourage leaders is once you see a team member who's excited about their ability to deliver those results themselves through the advice you've given, that sense of achievement is far greater than anything you'll ever get from doing it yourself.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And learning is so accessible these days. I mean, the amount that's on YouTube is simply overwhelming. But some of the, probably about a third of the money I've spent on courses have been just like $100 courses that have taught me something really specific. Like, I had an urge to learn how to make profitable advertising spend works. And I bought a course called Sell While You Sleep for $100. And I learned a lot from it. I got spreadsheets and I know how it works now. I can kind of see inside the matrix, if you know what I mean. And that's helped me make better decisions about what I want my future business model to look like for $100. And like an hour and a half of time that I can watch while I'm on the treadmill or my 5 p.m. walk. And then all the way up to like a 1-year full-on fitness program thing for $4,000. So I am so passionate and such a big believer in courses, no matter how big or small they are. If they're going to help you to achieve the fastest way to help you achieve the result you want. And so if that result and the emotional benefits it's going to bring you in your life to become the best version of you and be the best version of you for those around you. If someone watching this has not bought some sort of course or educational material in the past year, highly encourage you to think of one thing you want to learn about. Go look up something on Udemy, which we have no affiliation to whatsoever as of today, July 1st, 2025, and get learning.
So thanks for joining us. As always on Future Fit Leaders, let us know in the comments what was the one thing you took away from today's session that you think you'd love to apply or got you energized, or hit us up with a question that you'd like us to answer in a future episode, because we really want this to continue to grow and be about you.
Thanks, everyone.
See you next time on Future Fit Leaders.